Welcome to the Take Action podcast, where we empower communication partners to feel confident with AAC. I am Lauren Greenleaf, a certified speech-language pathologist with nearly a decade of experience in AAC. Join us weekly as we dive into all of the aspects of AAC and hear from communication partners just like you who are successfully integrating AAC into their daily lives. Whether you are an SLP, a parent, an educator, or any other communication partner, you are absolutely in the right place if you are ready to take actionable steps towards AAC success today. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Take Action podcast. I am really excited to have Courtney here to tell us a little bit about her AAC journey as a parent and also as an advocate. So, Courtney, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, I can't wait to hear all that you have to share. Even just in the slight minutes that we talked before the episode, I know it's going to be a great one. So, why don't you start by just kind of giving us a brief intro to who you are?
Yeah, so one of the things I am is I'm a mom, and my daughter has a rare genetic disorder and is non-speaking. So that plays a huge role in me even becoming an SLPA, a speech language pathology assistant. It's a mouthful. So I became that after my daughter was born. I went back to school. And then through her educational journey, I realized that every parent has to be an advocate. And so I actually went and took some courses and got board certified in special education advocacy. So I work both as an SLPA and as a special education advocate here in Arizona.
That is really cool, and I value advocacy so much. I think it's so important, and it's undervalued as a therapy service whole. I think I don't know that we always spend as much time focusing on it as we should because it's huge. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey with AAC?
Yeah. So my parent journey really started when I realized that my daughter was going to be born. Initially, she didn't have that diagnosis of a rare genetic disorder. That came later. But through her development, I realized she's not talking and she wasn't babbling. And so my little alarm bells were going off. And so we started with adaptive sign and ASL and working to communicate, and of course got her into speech therapy. But around age 4 or 5, I realized she couldn't really do the signs. She couldn't make the small motor movements to do the signs. And so we were kind of stuck at having 5 words, 5 signs. And that really wasn't effective communication for her. So we moved over. Hannah was born in the early 2000s. So these devices are not what you guys see out here. Okay. We had paper overlays. I had to twist a dial and record for each box. And then she was lucky enough to have 8 sheets of 6 words per sheet, right? So it was very cumbersome in the beginning. I did have to advocate for that. A lot of the people in her IEP team and her therapy team, this was very new, and they're like, I don't think she can do it. We don't see the value in it. But I kept pushing, and then luckily technology advanced, and now we have like iPads and touch chat. So currently my daughter's 20 and she uses Nova Chat. It's a dedicated device. And we started really working with that around 5th grade. And that's been we've been reevaluated. She's been reevaluated, and she just sends all the other ones back. She hands them back to the speech therapist and says, no, my device is Nova Chat. And that's what I love. And we
That's awesome.
chose that one really for a variety of reasons, but one is it has the contrast when you're sliding to the buttons, and it highlights it red. So for her visual impairment, that's really helpful. And it has delayed access to the button, meaning it doesn't select till she lifts up her finger. And with her visual struggles, that's important because sometimes she'll land on the wrong button, and then but she will slide over to the one that she really meant to hit. And so having it not select till she lifts her finger is really important. And
Yeah.
that's really that important step of having the right evaluators with OT and speech, and really looking at the whole child, because there is a lot of devices on the market now. So just
Yes.
picking one isn't always the best option.
Yes. Yes. And like you said, there's so many out there, and a lot of them now really do have all of the same features or almost exactly the same features. So it's hard to fine tune and decide exactly what is best. But um, SLPs that have really good knowledge on that feature matching piece are a great resource. And any professional really who has great knowledge on that is going to be really helpful. Um, what was the name of her first one? What was it called?
I honestly, I don't remember. It was just like this black box. I swear it was like 10 pounds, and I'll try to find it for you so you can put it in the show notes. I'll send you a picture, but it was just this big clunky thing, and it was cutting edge back in
Yeah.
2010. That was like cutting edge material here, and she was one of
Yeah.
like the first kids in Arizona to really get that through the Medicaid program. So we were really lucky to have this big, huge device.
It is really crazy. It's cool because you've really gotten to see like that transition over time. Um, I've seen just in the last like 10 years how much it's transitioned. But when I started in grad school, they had a lending library and it had a lot of the older devices there. So, like you're saying it, and I'm picturing something in my head that's probably exactly the same. But I just remember being like, wow, it's amazing people use that.
Yeah, because
um,
you had to make the overlays, you had to laminate them, then you had to record each button and then switch to like sheet one had to be labeled and then sheet
yeah.
two, take it off. So it was not like these robust systems where we can navigate to multiple pages and with ease where you can upload your own photos. We're talking camera, take the picture, print it at Walgreens, put it on the sheet. It
Yes,
was dedication to the max to get that done.
absolutely. So, with that, obviously, it takes a lot of dedication to be able to transition through an entire lifetime of AAC at this point. So, talking through like some of your challenges or some of the things that you feel like made your situation unique, what comes to mind?
Well, one was, and it's still this way today, unfortunately, but a lot of speech and language pathologists and even occupational therapists don't get a lot of exposure to assistive technology or AAC devices. It might be mentioned. Sometimes they don't even have a whole class on it. So, one of
Mhm.
our biggest struggles is having team members that were passionate, that understood, that saw our vision, having teachers that believed in Hannah's ability to learn this language and to be able to produce it. So that was a big struggle. And then time, being a mom, it's a whole nother language. And I don't want to downplay that because just like when we're learning, if we wanted to learn Spanish or French, there's dedication, hours of work that goes into it. And you're going to feel discouraged when you're feeling like, I should know this. I should know where
Yeah.
this button is. I should know how to use this. A lot of fear in breaking it or harming it.
Yeah.
I've seen not only me not using it right away back in the early days, but then parents keeping it in bubble wrap because they're so afraid of it getting broken because they worked so hard to get it. So, like, releasing that there's a perfect way to do it and just kind of settling into, I'm going to do something every day. I'm going to model on here every day, or I'm going to pick snack time. I tell parents, picking a time that you feel like you can be successful and
Mhm.
modeling it or sitting down and playing an activity or reading a book. So just really settling into, I'm going to do this no matter what, and I'm going to do this even if it takes a lot of work. And just making that my mantra.
Yes. And it's fearful. I mean, it's fearful for the speech therapist, it's fearful for the parents, it's fearful for a lot of people involved because it is this like new shiny thing that we know costs in many cases thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And I've seen a lot of people do the same type of thing, like, oh, well, we're not going to send it to school because we don't want it to break, or we're not going to send it to the park because what if he drops it down the slide? And um, they really do make them very durable these days. I understand the fear, but like you said, we got to use it. We got to get moving with it.
Yeah.
So Um, Journey wise, or I guess transition wise, she's been working with some form of AAC for, like you said, about 20 years now. So what did that like path look like? What did that progress piece look like for you guys?
For us, I mean, my daughter Hannah, I love her to pieces, but she is one of those kiddos who has a complex body. She has, tightness. She has a cognitive disability. So she has multiple things that are roadblocks to her learning. So I think the biggest piece was not seeing the overnight success, but still fighting and believing that my daughter's voice was in there. And I might cry because recently she put her papa comes over once a week and does caregiving for me and has like a play date with her. And it was his day to come. And on her device, she put Papa
Oh,
friend. And it just like, we've worked for years for her to spontaneously create her own messages. And sometimes we have to play a game called What Did Hannah Mean? Because it'll be like, really, 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 do I? And I'm trying to figure out what was she trying to say there. She's also started exploring with colors. And I was able to figure out she was mad. She put red, not, and then not okay or frustrated. Her device was actually broken, and so she was using her backup device. So she
okay.
actually put like no, red, frustrated. She was trying to say it's not the same, and that was a
Yeah.
huge breakthrough for us. But for years, her teachers and I kept going, and I didn't get that feedback. I didn't get spontaneous communication. And I just got tingles because it just took me back to when I had to keep fighting for it to be a part of her IEP, her individual education program at school, because they're like, she's not using it. It doesn't seem like she's interested. And then, one day she put eat snack brownie, and her teacher went and found a brownie. She found it somewhere in the school building and brought it to her, because that was Hannah's first spontaneous communication at school, was to request a course food. She loves food. She's a foodie.
I
um,
love it.
so for us, it's really been the journey of, I believe in her even if no one else does. I believe that she should have access to a voice, even if it takes us 10 years to get there. But that's a kind of grit that not everyone has, you know? And
Yeah.
so I had to develop that grit, because there was really multiple times where if I had listened to people around me, she wouldn't be using her device. And unfortunately, she also wouldn't have a voice because she's never developed word approximation. She doesn't really have babbling or any words. That's not there. So if I
Yeah.
didn't pursue this, we would literally, she has her 4 to 5 signs she'd memorized. They're in her soul. She knows those signs,
Yeah.
but she hasn't learned more than that. And then that's where we would be. She wouldn't have a voice other than that. So I'm glad that we kept with it. But in her case, it's definitely been slow and steady.
Yeah. Um, such a powerful message, and I hope everyone listening is taking a second to let that all sink in, um, because it is really easy to give up, and it is really easy to be like, you know what, she's not interested. Maybe we need a new device, or she's not interested. Maybe we should try like all of these other things, or she's not interested. We're just going to set it aside. Um, but you're here sharing like we stuck with it. We worked really hard at it. We kept going, and now we're seeing really great successes. I mean, those are really cool stories. I'm over here like getting my tissues out because it's just so powerful that something as simple as a tablet with words on it, which is not simple at all, but could give her so much ability to interact with the world around her, and that you guys were able to really stick through it and work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, You really kind of hit on the next two questions I had for you already. But any other like major successes to an AAC device that you want to share with us? Like just having it around you guys?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to try to have it available in multiple environments. I know that we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, which is the fear of it being broken, but there is so many learning opportunities that take place outside the classroom, outside of your house and in the community. So I think for my daughter, really taking it to where and taking it to places she's motivated by, or having it available at dinner time because she's a huge foodie and that's motivating, having
Yeah.
music and connecting it. This is something that some families might not realize, that her device is connected to Alexa. So she can actually hit and communicate. So a lot of kids who um, Alexa can't understand them. So they get
Yeah.
really frustrated. They see these other people activating it and getting these cool feedbacks, and they're like, "Hey, I want that." So we connected her device to talk to it, and then we got special light bulbs so she can have like a concert in her room. So those types of things are really going to motivate your child, get them invested. And I think that's another great way to get successes is to, and this is kind of where therapy's been moving towards, which I'm excited because I started back in 2010, like sit them
Yeah.
at the desk. This is where we do our learning. You earn your breaks, right? And now
Yeah.
when you know better, you do better. And that's what I always
Yep.
tell parents too. Even as a therapist, I think back and cringe a little bit about some of my therapy sessions, but when you learn, you change. And so now, like following the child's lead, letting them, if they're interested in trains, go with it. If they're interested in music or the trolls, that's where you're going to get more learning and more buy-in from them than trying to force like the old school hand over hand and making them touch. We used to think
Yeah.
that's how you got them to learn. Now we're realizing, no, you have it out and you model throughout the day, you model, and they're listening and taking it in, even if they're looking somewhere totally different. And
Yeah.
sometimes Hannah activates and does a button sequence. She's memorized it. She's over here and she's just doing it with her left hand. So just believe that they're taking it in, even if it doesn't look like what learning is traditionally looked like in the past for students and our own
Yeah.
kids. They are taking it in. So just make it fun, make it functional, and get their buy in.
Yeah, it's really that idea of like presuming competence or that least dangerous assumption piece. Like, even though she wasn't looking at it, she was clearly telling you guys something because she activated all the buttons. And we could go the opposite route and just be like, oh, well, she didn't mean any of that. Or we could go the positive route and say that was entirely intentional. And I really love the idea of the different lights in her room so she can have like a dance party. Because that Alexa piece is super powerful. I know my girls love activating it, and my youngest is only 2, so she can't actually activate it. She thinks she can, but it never actually
Right.
quite works. But I could see how frustrating it would be to like not be able to do that. So what a cool resource to tap into.
Yeah.
Um, so in your journey, you've obviously done a lot of advocating. What has been, aside from really like keeping the AEC device around, what's been kind of your big what you feel like you're constantly advocating for?
Well, I think as far as when our children go to school and getting them on that IEP and advocating for it to be on there, and we can go. If are you okay if I start into that piece a
Yeah,
little
go
bit?
for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
So, especially so when my daughter got her communication device, it was an outside school eval. So I'm going to try to break it down
Okay.
and keep it as simple as I can for our families. But so it was an outside medical evaluation that got her approval for the communication device. That's one route you can take. So the second piece is getting the school to acknowledge that they need their AAC device to access their education. I want parents to write that one down because it's accessing their education and it's an assistive technology tool that should be provided at school. So a parent can provide it or the school can provide it, but you need to get it written on their IEP because otherwise they could say, well, it's not really needed. They could argue if the child needs it. If you forget it, are they going to provide a backup if it's broken?
Mhm.
So it's really important if you get it through an outside mechanism, whether it's a charity, a grant, a Medicaid eval, then you go back to your IEP team and you get them to acknowledge the child needs that for communication and get it integrated into their individual education program, their IEP. That's the biggest thing I can recommend, because what happens is you might get it from an outside person, then you bring it to school and it stays in their backpack and you don't have any legal leverage. The IEP is a legal document. I'm not a lawyer, but it's a contract between you and the school, and what's in there is what they have to provide. If it's not in there, it's a nice suggestion, but they don't have to provide it. So that's a key part in advocating. And then a second really, really big point is staff training. So if your speech language pathologist generally is in charge of this part of the IEP, sometimes they'll have an assistive technology specialist and they'll partner. So the first step is in identifying if your SLP has background in assistive technology in AAC. Just because they are an amazing SLP does not mean that they have experience or background in this. So we need to get them training. And so asking that can be tricky because nobody wants to sit in a meeting and admit that they don't have a skill set that they're being expected to have. So I think
Yeah.
a parent leading that and saying, what kind of support do you need? So look at your SLP and say, what kind of support do you need for my child to be successful in having this at school? Do you need additional training? Open that door for them that feels inviting and safe for them to say, I absolutely want to support your child, but I personally have never worked with LAMP Word for Life, or I've never worked with, NovaChat or Touch Chat or whatever the system is. Invite them. And then the second phase is the teacher and the paraprofessionals are the aides. So Hannah, my daughter, was a lot of times in what we consider in Arizona like a self-contained or a life skills class, which was appropriate for her. Guess who works with her most of the time, most of the day? That is her para. So if the para isn't comfortable using the device, the para is not going to model on the device. It's going to get a lot of learning opportunities lost because those key professionals haven't been trained to support it. So you can actually get training written into your child's IEP. And that is the number one thing that it has to be in there. It can be in there. It's required if needed, but there's a lot of resistance. I'm going to say probably 90% of the cases that I work with families and I go in and I start informing the school of this, they are surprised. They've never heard of it before. They've never done it before. And they're like, I have to do it. And I'm like, yeah, you have to do it. Like it's required. So I think that's the biggest roadblock I've seen to kids being successful at school is getting, and sometimes we have this awesome SLP and they're rowing the boat and they're doing all the work by themselves. And as you know, 1 to 2 times a week, for 20 to 30 minutes, we're not going to get what we need for the kids to learn and grow and develop communication. It has to be a full team effort. So even getting the SLP sometimes say, I'm just getting so many roadblocks from other staff or my admin getting this piece in here. And they end up feeling frustrated because it's not getting done and carried out in the IEP. And they know it needs to be too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like this really tricky balance, right? Of like, it's required, it has to be there, but then there are so many moving parts and people involved in it being on there,
Mm-hmm.
that, like you said, the SLP could be totally on board. But when admin comes in and says no, it's like now you're fighting with your boss, and that's its own dynamic. And I know you did a reel about that the other day. Like, just like,
Actually, and my reel was that the admin tried to say something, and I knew it was wrong, and I knew the teachers and therapists in the room knew it was wrong,
yeah,
but it's really hard to tell your boss you're incorrect, and that's
yep,
where I'm going to say to any of your listeners that as a parent of a child with a disability, it is a requirement to advocate. How you
yep,
get there, how soon you start, but we do not currently live in a society right now where just because the law's there, just because it's written, people aren't following it. Some people don't even know it exists. So
Yep.
being a parent advocate in the IEP meeting is crucial, because any therapist or teacher can run behind you and say, I agree with mom. That's because it came from you. That's your parent
Yep.
concern. You're bringing it up. And that opens the door for your therapy team and your teacher team to say, I agree, or I have heard of that, or I think that would be beneficial. And that kind of takes that pressure off of the therapist to be the
Yeah.
one kind of pushing this uphill towards the admin. Like, I'm the only one that wants this. So I really, really encourage parents to have those conversations with your IEP team separately and say, hey, how's it going? What support
Yeah.
do you need? How can I help you? Because your parent voice is very, very powerful. But learning the laws and how to and activate it, right? How to activate that parent advocacy. It's not the parents don't generally want to, they don't know what to ask, they don't know what to
Yeah.
say to kind of get it going.
Yeah, and I really like the wording of like, what can I do to support you while you learn this? Um, because I've been in many a situations where I've passed on a device or seen a kid come in not to my caseload but to someone else's, and I knew that the education piece wasn't there. And on my end, I sent as much as I possibly could, but like again, you said it's not in the IEP documentation, so entirely up to that person on whether or not they even take me up on those things. And I am embarrassed to say that I have never actually written training into an IEP before. And I don't actually know that I've ever seen it written into an IEP
Yeah,
before. So that
it's
was really
rare.
awesome.
That's
Yeah.
why you probably never heard of it.
Yeah.
I put it under a lot of times supplemental aids and support. I'll put it in there.
Okay.
Sometimes we put it under, the clarification box that exists. Depends on your IEP system, what you're writing in.
Yeah.
But IEP Pro has a clarification box, so we'll put it in there.
Yeah.
And I can go into that a little bit too. So, like a
Yeah.
parent
Go for it.
input statement, when you go to your IEP meeting, they say, hey, Miss Burnett, like, where do you want Hannah to be in the next year? That's a
Yep.
really overwhelming question to a parent who knows their child is significantly delayed in multiple areas. You're like, well, of course, I want them walking and talking and making friends. Like, that's
Yeah.
what, if I can wave my magic wand, that's what I want. So,
Yeah.
breaking that down though, so you could say, I want my child to have access to their communication device so that they can make friends and access their education and participate in circle time. So, under the law, they are required, your IEP team is required to take your parental input, your caregiver input, and show how they weave that into the IEP. So, prepare that ahead of time, send it ahead of time, and let them know, like, these are the 2 or 3 areas that I really want to focus on for my child. Then in your present levels, most of the school districts don't want staff saying the child is using Prolico to go, whatever, whatever. But you can say the child is using a robust communication system, a layout of 60 or whatever their layout is. Describe it. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed
Yep.
to do that. And in the present levels, I would say you're allowed to say currently, currently
Yes.
Hannah is using Nova Chat. And then
Yes.
in your what's being provided by the school district, right? You can
Yep.
have an adaptive toilet chair. You can have a Riften seating chair with great support. That can be written in, and it says who provides it.
Yep.
School. So we can say who's providing the AAC device. If it came through Medicaid, if it came through your insurance, it could say provided by parents. And then in the clarification box, a similar device will be provided if the child's device is lost, broken, or doesn't come to school. So the school then is acknowledging, okay, the parents are providing it, but we're going to do a backup. Here's the other caveat. The school is responsible to provide the communication device if it's necessary for the child to access their education. I'm using those specific words for a specific reason.
Hmm.
So parents, like, take note that They can evaluate as a school team, they can recommend, and then the child can get it. So if you're like, I don't have Medicaid, my insurance
Hmm.
won't cover it. I don't have $10,000 because who does
Yep.
for a communication device? So the school can. I see a lot of resistance to that. They don't want to spend the money, but this is
Hmm.
where knowledge is power. It's not optional. If you can show that your child needs this to access their education and it's connected to their disability, the law doesn't say if it's super expensive, the school district doesn't have to do it.
Yep.
They do not care. So it is legally required under the federal law, and I'll just emphasize that for parents breaking it down. There are federal laws that protect our students in all states, no matter if you're a rural school district, an inner city school district. There's no a charter, a public charter school. That's another one that tries to act like they don't have to provide it. If they receive public funds and you're not paying private tuition, it's not a private school, they fall under the federal law that says this is part of the Individuals Disability Education Act and you have to provide it. So just parents need to know that. And I will send you, I sent you the link to the exact part of the IDA law that
Yeah.
specifically talks about assistive technology. But that's where this falls under is there's the assistive technology umbrella, and an augmentative and alternative communication device is one of many assistive
Yeah.
technology tools that can be there. And you would ask for an assistive technology evaluation. And this is where I'm going to break that down for families.
Go for it.
So, unlike a speech eval or an occupational therapy eval, there's one person like Lauren who has training. She's going to do, that's her certificate, that's her licensure, and she's going to do the speech eval. With assistive technology eval, it's not regulated to say, this is the person, they have a special licensure to do this eval. So it's a collaborative eval. And that usually happens between the SLP, your speech language pathologist, because we love acronyms in special ed,
We love
and
acronyms.
your occupational therapist or your physical therapist, and even the teacher. So
Hmm.
everybody would collaborate to do this assistive technology evaluation. And part of that would be the speech component. Now, when I asked for that, 99% of the time, the school district is like, we've never done that. I've had psychologists tell me, I've never heard of that. What are you talking about? Help me understand it. So I would say a big part of a parent and even a therapist journey is educating. It's not us versus them that
Yeah.
sometimes we're sold out here. Like you have to be angry, or they're just trying to hold this, they're trying to not give this to your child. What I've seen more often than not is a lack of knowledge and a lack of mentorship of people that came before you in the school district to train you. They didn't know, so they didn't teach you. You don't learn it in grad school.
Yep.
So where are you learning it? You know what I mean? So it most of the time I'm having to educate. And so that's why I always tell parents to start off softly but persistently with, hey, this is what this is. Let me show you the law. Let me pull it down for you. I have I can send you those two. There's Sat and Awadi that are two
Mm.
free templates that therapists
Yeah.
can use. So I can send that to you to put
Okay.
in the show notes. But that really, they're free. They're online. You download them. Each person takes their part. And when you're done, you can have an assistive technology evaluation. But I
Yeah.
had to teach them. I had to show them during the IEP meeting, walk them through it. And I am excited because the psychologist said the magic words I love to hear. I can't wait to use this with other students. I can't believe I
Yay.
didn't know about this. This would be such a great tool to help foster independence and self advocacy. Thank you for letting me know about it. So there is a way to advocate without conflict or putting someone down or coming out. I always try to come out from a place of they probably don't know. So let's try
Yeah.
this first. And then sometimes I have to end up being like, this is the law. It's not optional. If you're not going to do it, then we'll have to go another route. that's last resort, because most of the time it's, I don't know this existed. I didn't know how to do it. Thank you for telling me. Let's try it, you know?
Yeah, and you know what? That's been my experience very frequently is that people just aren't knowledgeable about it. Um, like so in the districts that I've worked in, they've either been really big or they're small and they contract out to in Ohio, we call them educational service centers. I know everywhere calls them a little bit different. But they contract out to those people. So then they have to call that person in to come do the eval and talk with all the people and things like that. So they don't always know that it's an option necessarily until somebody does specifically request it, and then they're like, oh, we gotta figure out how to get this done. But I think you laid out you very clearly laid out expectations that are supposed to be in the IEP and expectations that come with that eval. And I just appreciate how you come at it as not like a forceful from the start. Obviously at some point it gets that way. um, Not in all cases, though. Um, but just this very like, hey, you know what? This is going to be really supportive. Like, what support do you need for me to get this ball rolling? And it's just a really like fresh way to come at that advocacy. Because I've also been in a lot of situations where I've come in and it's been nasty from the start. And as a
You're like,
professional, that's
whoa, I
really
didn't
hard.
know.
I
Like,
didn't do
I'm not
anything.
the
I
enemy.
didn't do anything. And usually I've also come in contact a lot of situations where the professionals in the building, the therapists, the teachers are trying so hard themselves to advocate, but they can't get through that admin piece. So we are like feel for the families at the same time because we're like trying really hard to get something through and it's just being met with roadblock after roadblock. But it really comes down to like this is legally required to access your education. um, and that's kind of the base of it. So for those families that are like, I have tried the nice way, Courtney, I've tried everything that I can and the school still won't listen to me, what is their next step? Do they have another option after that?
Yeah, so they have a couple of options. They have you agree that you get your parent rights at every IEP meeting. It's a legal
Yep.
requirement to say they're offering. So when you break down your parent rights, there's a lot of technical language in there. It was written by a lawyer, so it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to understand, but you do have ways to go through and make a complaint to your local education, your state's education board. You have a right to file a complaint. Like if you had something written into your IEP and they didn't do it, or they're denying you an eval, but the law says you're allowed to have an eval, you can do that. Another great step, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a special education advocate, but I've had numerous clients tell me, I don't understand. I said that, but then I brought you and you said it. And all of the sudden, it's all happening. I've also had clients tell me, I've never had an IEP meeting with this many people here. They've never offered me or done these questions. It's not right. It's 100% wrong, but I've seen it over and over again. When you
Yep.
bring a special education advocate or somewhere in that realm of somebody else who really knows the law, and a special education advocate is far cheaper than any lawyer you're ever going to find out there. It's a good step before you get to needing a lawyer is to bring somebody else with you.
Yeah.
It really, like I said, it's not right, but it puts the school on notice that you're done. You know
Yep.
your stuff. You're going to get what your child needs, and I'm bringing this person here to ensure. And what ends up happening is all of a sudden there's more pieces of the IEP laid out. There's more explanation. Another
Mm-hmm.
free resource, a lot of parents don't know, you can request for a facilitated IEP. So the
Okay.
schools have to agree to it. But what happens is, so let's say you're like, oh, I really want an advocate, but maybe there's none in my area. Or it's not something I can afford right now. You can ask for a facilitated IEP. Your school agrees to it, you agree to it, and they come in and they're neutral. Their job is to say, here's what the law says. I'm going to facilitate and make sure everybody's voices are heard. This is really good too if you have a couple, either a parent or a team member who just can't seem to try to be collaborative. This just
Gotcha.
is not happening. The facilitator isn't part of the school team and it's not somebody the parent paid. So it really is a neutral party just to ensure that the IEP is being written correctly. So that's another free option that parents can do. But enacting their parent rights, put things formally in a parent concerns letter, do a state complaint to your Department of Ed, because sometimes they'll investigate right away. Sometimes if they get 3 or 4 complaints from the same district, then all of a sudden they'll open
Mhm.
up an audit. School districts don't like that
Yep.
because now they're not just looking at your kid's IEP. They can pluck any IEP from anybody and go over it with a fine tooth comb and pull out everything they did wrong and put them on an
Yep.
improvement plan. So usually if the school district senses that you're going that way, they will say, okay, wait, we don't want that. What can we do to fix this? And then you start that conversation. But usually it takes, I hate to say it, but escalating it either through writing, your parent rights, an advocate, a facilitated IEP, something that kind of shows them you're not going to just sign off on it and copy and paste it forward and have the same school year you had last year. Usually you have to enact your parent rights, and that can feel scary. I'd say
Yep.
most of the people that hire me kind of know the laws being broken. They've
Yeah.
tried, but they're nervous. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to ruin their relationship with their school district or IEP team, but their love for their child runs deep. That they're going to get, the
Yeah.
mama bear gets activated. And so, but a lot of time what I'm offering is a lot of coaching saying, you're not wrong. Okay, here's
Yep.
how we're going to word it. We can change 2 or 3 words that you've been using. These are words that the school district lawyer, admin, higher ups, they recognize these words and they know what that
Mhm.
means. So we're just going to sprinkle that into your letter. And then that will start a snowball effect of things starting to happen that the parent had been asking for. But in writing is the most important.
Yes.
Verbally, we cannot hold, even if your therapist was well-meaning, we can't track that they were informed. We can't track dates. We can't track timelines. So if your SLP says, sure, I'll do a assistive technology eval, email them back and say, thank you so much. I enjoyed talking with you today about getting Johnny an AAC eval. Please let me know what I need to sign to get that started. I'm so excited to partner with you. So it can be done in a very sweet, kind way, but
Yeah.
also I'm going to get my documentation that I asked for this so that we have
Yep.
a paper trail, you know?
Always get it in writing. That's even as a therapist that worked in the school, almost everything I did was in writing so that I had that track
Yourself
record.
too, like to
Yeah,
protect your license too, you
absolutely.
need to make sure you're delivering services ethically and on
Yep.
time, and you have timelines. The federal
Mhm.
government says each state can make a shorter timeline, but the federal government says this is the maximum time you have to accomplish
Yep.
this task. So those in writing helps us keep track of when should this timeline have been started. And I've seen, some situations where we're 6 months overdue. We're 6 months
Oh, no.
past the timeline. A ball got dropped. And it's
Yep.
really hard for the school district to say, oh my gosh, she went on maternity leave. This person came back. This didn't get documented, right?
Yep.
It didn't get put into the computer system. We messed up. Here's what we're going to do to make it right. And here's how we're going to get back on track. And
Ab
everybody's human. There is human errors. Like I said,
absolutely.
sometimes it's straight up, we're just denying you. And sometimes it's, oh my gosh, this person left, this person was hired, this person went on medical leave, and your child's, situation got overlooked. Okay, now we need to hold them accountable. The best way you can do that is to go to your special ed director, or if you've tried all the lower levels, then you go to your special ed director and say, hey, I wanted to let you know before I file a state complaint, I wanted to give you one more chance to fix this. Here's my timeline of events. Here's what I've tried. 9 times out of 10, that will do it. They'll be like, you have the receipts, right? You have
Mhm.
the documentation. They're going to see that they were in the wrong, and they're going to activate the right people to get that situation. So I always say start local, start with your
Yeah.
SLP, start with your IEP team, your building principal, and then sometimes we have to keep, but they like to see that you tried too, because it shows
Yes.
you'll get, how can I say it? If you go right to the top, they'll
Yeah.
assume you're being dramatic, even if you're
Yep.
not, even if you're 100% justified. So when you
Yep.
show that you went through the chain of command and you did your part to be collaborative, to talk to them, and then you end up at the special ed director or the superintendent, I say go to the special ed director. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
A lot of these superintendents do not know about special ed law. They don't know it, they don't know how bad it is. They don't know how bad
Yeah.
it is because they don't have a background in special ed. So I really
Yeah.
recommend your special ed director because they should have a background in special ed if they're running the special ed department.
We would hope so, right? This is all like very, very valuable. And as someone who has been in the schools, everything you keep saying, I'm like, yeah, I've witnessed that. I've witnessed an audit that they've come in and looked at everybody's IEPs. And I've witnessed what it's like to have an advocate at a meeting and what it's like to have not have an advocate or to see a timeline get dropped and it have to go up the chain of command. And it's like you said, it shouldn't ever happen. It's not something that should exist, but it does. It just looks a lot different, and each school is going to be different in how they interact with some of those things. But like you said, there's a law, and we got to follow the law. And I think empowering parents with that piece in and of itself is really, really helpful. So we'll make sure all of those resources are in the show notes. But as we kind of wrap up, what's your kind of final piece of advice for families that are stuck and not feeling like they're getting what they need for
Yeah.
their kid?
So, one more piece about the advocate. I think doing an
Yeah,
advocate interview and making sure that you're picking the right advocate. So, in full
I love it.
transparency, just like I told you, there's no licensor for assistive technology. There's actually no there's programs like I went through, I'm board certified in that, but it's still not regulated. Like anyone can say they're an advocate. I hate to
Yeah,
say that. They can just like plop it on there and be like, I'm an advocate. So, really partnering with the right advocate. Early on, I hired an advocate, and mid meeting, I was like, what did I do? It was so bad.
oh
She was
no.
she was the definition of angry advocate. You know what I'm talking about? She was
Oh,
like, people were crying, and I was like, this is not what I wanted. I didn't want it to go this bad. I wanted somebody like me to come in. So like making sure you like, what's your style? How are you going
yeah,
to handle this? What how do you start out? So like making sure, like, if you want an angry advocate, then make sure you hire an angry advocate. I really feel like that my approach is more successful in maintaining. My goal is to always maintain relationships with the school district. I want
yeah,
parents to be able to go back in, and teachers not run and hide from them, run and hide from me. And so
yep.
there's a way to get it done without burning the whole building down. And that's always my goal. So I just want to caution people, like, do your interviews, get a referral, kind of see what their past clients have said about them. Make sure you're getting the right one. So as far as for parents, I do have a free resource, Assistive Technology in the IEP. It's a 20-minute webinar where I break down like where you can put things in the IEP. So we'll put those in the show notes
Yep.
there where they can access that. And then I really encourage parents to do their research, whether they're partnering with an advocate or doing some Google research, and really hone in on that IDA law and start to understand it. You have to be able to move from my feeling is to the data and the law say. So I always tell parents, it's not that
Yes.
your feeling's wrong. It's not that
Yep.
your gut's wrong, but how you change that is to say, under the federal law, it says my child can have access to assistive technology evaluation. Under the law, it says that my daughter can have a communication device at school, and it's illegal for you to keep it in her backpack. So that changes the messaging from, I really want you to use this. It really makes me sad. Well, it does make me sad, but that's not going
Mhm.
to enact the change. So really being able to pull out where in the law your child's protections come. Is it the ADA law? Is it IDA, the two federal laws? Look into those,
Yeah.
get familiar, and then say, because now it changes it from my feeling is to the law says. And I'm curious, how are we meeting this section of the IDA law with our current IEP? Another thing is a strategy that I use a lot is asking really great questions that compel what you want out of it. So instead of
Yeah.
saying, your goal sucks, I don't like it. Okay. Your therapist is going to shut down. They worked hard on that. Okay. No
Yep.
matter what you think, they worked hard on it. They probably wrote it after hours.
Yeah.
So saying, I really liked this part of the goal, but I was hoping for this. Or can you tell me more about how you picked this goal for my child, and how it, can you take me on the journey of why that skill is important for their communication? So that's a
Yeah.
way to say, I don't like the goal without saying I don't like the goal. And it gives your therapist a chance to explain. You might find that you're closer than you think on
Yeah.
what you're wanting. It's just how it was worded or how they're executing it, right?
Yeah.
So asking really great questions, preparing your parent input statement, and then not being afraid to go through your parent handbook, go through your rights, and start enacting some of them to escalate it if you've tried and tried and tried. I am shocked. I don't know why I'm still shocked, but every time I get like, let's say a first grader, a second grader, and I'm like, why don't I not have a communication device? Or why
Yeah.
is this not, it's not a last resort. I think
No.
that was the other part of my parent journey that I delayed starting it because I looked at it as, I might start right. I looked at it as giving up. I'm
Yeah.
giving
Okay.
up my child's, I'm giving up on the fact that my child might talk. And it's not giving up because the research is there. It's very, very clear. Communication devices do not stop or hinder the development of verbal language. If your child, nothing is easier than just talking. If your child is physically and cognitively able to do that, they will. It might take time. They might need speech therapy. Many kids develop that over years and they're able to talk. My daughter, if I waited, I would still be waiting. She's 20 years old. I would have no communication with her. I'd have no
Yeah.
access to her thoughts and ideas. So I think that's another really big myth is the wait and see. They're too young. They need finger isolation. These are just ones that I can think of off the top of my head. We have switch access with the
Mhm.
switch where they can, we have eye gaze where they can select it with their eye. They have
Yeah.
like a dot that goes on their head. I
Mhm.
mean, finger isolation is the least of our worries. We have
Yep.
the technology to accomplish. And I did want to share one story, and it was a
Go for it.
training I went to for AAC, of course. And they were talking about the power of not needing necessarily grammatically correct sentences. Like sometimes we get hung up on,
Yeah.
doing a 5-word utterance or, these grammatically correct, but communication is effective even if it's not grammatically correct. And so
Yep.
one thing that was burned into my mind was a support coordinator, a caseworker went to check on an adult who was living in like a group home. And on his device, he said, hungry, sad, lonely. And she said,
Mm.
are you not eating? Are they not feeding you? And he said, no. Do you feel safe? He said, no. Do you want to move? He said, yes. So he was able to report abuse, neglect, which the numbers on that, I won't shock your listeners with that. It's horrendous. It's despicable and it's likely. So, teaching our kids how to self advocate, how to self report. And another big thing is most law enforcement will not prosecute or pursue a case if the victim cannot testify or self report, which is also despicable. But I've seen numerous cases where abuse was witnessed and it didn't end up being prosecuted because the child or adult didn't have the language to confirm that they were abused. So I really, really encourage parents and therapists to give our children access to robust communication systems. It, not to be dramatic, it could literally save their life and prevent years of abuse and neglect. That man didn't need grammatically correct sentences to get himself
Mm-mm.
out of that group home that wasn't doing their job, that wasn't keeping him safe. So teaching our kids to protest, teaching our kids opinions, teaching them about consent, which is something I didn't start early enough with my daughter, but now I know, so now I'm doing better, is teaching them when they have caregivers around them all the time, how can we help them identify what is appropriate and inappropriate when a lot of our kids rely on caregivers both in the home and outside the home to access their world? And that might be a podcast for another day, but I just really want to leave parents with the knowledge that this is so, so important to me. I will talk about it till I die. I cannot sleep at night knowing that there might be a child that cannot advocate for themselves or communicate. Behavior is communication. If a child cannot
Mhm.
communicate, they are going to melt down. They are going to lash out. They are going to do things that we don't understand because they cannot tell us that they want a cup of water.
Yep.
Hannah cannot go get herself a cup of water. She relies on me for water, food,
Hmm.
changing her. Think about that for yourself. You
Yep.
couldn't talk, you couldn't walk, and you're relying on everybody to help you, and yet nobody knows what you want. You might throw a cup too. You might fall
Yeah.
down on the ground and cry, right? Because
Yep.
you are not getting your most basic needs met because they're not mind readers. And so even when we think we know what a child is saying, they're their own person. They're going to
Yep.
connect things and do these things so much on their own. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I would leave them with, is that there's so much power in this, no matter how much work it takes as a therapist or a parent. It's worth it, and every child deserves to have the option. And some kids use it
Yes.
just sporadically as needed. But a lot of individuals with autism have shared that when they're having sensory overload, their voice, it's not that it doesn't work, it's like they can't access it in that moment. They cannot access it. And so I have a lot of clients that use it for when they're overstimulated, when they're tired. They don't use it all the time. That doesn't make it less valuable. It's still
Yep.
valuable to them. So thank you so much for letting me share my
Yes.
passion about it as a parent and as an advocate, because so many people are still learning this today. This will be fresh information, and I hope that inspires them to pursue it and go after it.
Yes. No, Courtney, you have provided so much knowledge in the time that we've been on here. And this to me is one of those episodes you're going to go back and listen to a couple times and make sure you got all the good stuff. And I think as a parent, you can take away so much from this. And even as a speech therapist or an educator, you can take away so much of this. And we're definitely going to have to dive deeper into some other stuff on another episode, because there's so much to talk about, and you have a really unique perspective being the mom of an AAC user and an advocate for so many AAC users. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to get on an interview with me. Um, with that, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or services you offer? Where should they go?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram a lot. I know there's lots of different social platforms, but that's the one I'm on, and it's just Courtney Burnett Advocate is my handle. And then my website is courtneyburnett.com, and I have a lot of resources on there as well as my Instagram. So I hope families follow and connect. I give daily tips. I'll usually share different case studies throughout the school year or help parents remember things that they can do for their own child. So I really try to provide a lot of value on my social media as well.
Yes. And I can attest, she provides tons of value. I'm constantly like, "Ooh, that was a really great reel. That was a really great post. I need to save that for later." So, Courtney,
So
thanks so much for being here.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. Courtney was a huge wealth of knowledge, and there was so much information packed into this episode. So much information from her personal experiences to her experiences as an advocate and helping families all over the country really navigate through how to support their AAC users. She is absolutely worth a follow. So please check her out on Instagram. And for our action step today, I really want you to take a few minutes, whether you are an SLP or whether you are a parent or an educator, and really look at what that service looks like on the IEP. Is the AAC on that IEP? Is training included? If training needs to be included, are we saying what we need to be saying to make sure what needs to be done at school is being done at school? If you are not in the school system, kind of think through some of those other advocacy pieces that she touched on. Are we teaching them words that can really support their advocacy long term? That's really important for our school-based SLPs too. But if you're looking for an action step and school wasn't it, that would be my next place to go, is really start diving into those more concrete emotions, body parts, self-advocacy skills, and really just navigating those with your AAC users. And we will see you next week on the Take Action podcast.